Have you ever met a saint? The chances are that you would have not really known it, although you might have an intuition that there's something special here. But it can happen. I can think at least of 2 cases where I met somebody who's now canonized. When I was still in school, there was a group of us school children or adolescents sitting as you're sitting there around Mother Teresa in our parish, because it was a huge parish in Cardiff, and she had been invited. But this is before she really became a world figure, because in 1970 she was still just getting known. And she was very close to us. She wasn't at all aloof. Father Lawrence, my spiritual father, asked her after a little talk, which was in English, she had good English, well, I can see lots of girls around, what if one of the girls would like to become one of yours, or even one of the boys? Do you have? And then she answered him immediately, well, if you wanted to become one of our community, it might cause a few problems, but if the girls did, then we can look into it. And then the other would be John Paul II. He would have been coming and going in student days, that is to say that it was his university where we were at, and he would be at all the ceremonies that were going on in the Vatican. And one time he was there just before me at the end of some course on hearing confessions, and he looked straight into my eyes with his deep blue eyes and just said, a good pilgrimage. And what he meant by that was through life and through glory, where he now is. And there is more to both Mother Teresa and John Paul II than meets the eye. We know now, from what has come out after her death, that she was also quite a mystic, and there's a whole hidden side to her which was not known while she was alive, except by the immediate circle. John Paul II also was somebody who had a hidden side to him. He was in his 30s, and he was told that he had been thought of as Bishop of Krakow. He took it extremely seriously, and they were trying to find him one evening, and he had disappeared. Eventually they thought of looking in the convent chapel, and they found him, and he'd been there for a long time in that position, prostrate, lying on the ground before the tabernacle. He had realized what was ahead of him. He also had got to know another saint of our time, whom people who I was meeting in Italy would have known. And he, Padre Pio, did tell him when he was a young priest, you are going to be Pope. So when it came to the election after the death of Paul VI, he must have been puzzled, especially when he saw that other names were coming out. And Pope Luciani, of course, was elected. Now, he also is probably on the way to beatification, and there's more to him than meets the eye. He also had this element of being very close, and is referred to this day in Italy as Il Papa del Sorriso, the Pope of the Smile. That, by the way, is a test. If we are causing pain, we're certainly disqualified from the League. Think of that. Well, he is thought by quite a few to have died, as it were, a martyr. As they would say in the far west, he knew too much. I won't go there now, but I think I know what you might pick up. Well, John Paul II, of course, was elected after that surprise, and he was a very young pope when he became pope. But this bit is not known. Even in his life, there were puzzling things around him. One day, he came across a person who had been terribly tortured under the communist regime, and he, of course, had grown up with the communist music around him. He had gone to this secret seminary underground going to classes after work. And it was a nun who had been exposed to very, very brutal treatment in detention, and for a while had been exposed by being placed right next where it was happening to a place where there was emissions of actually radioactive material. It was a kind of X-ray thing, and she was riddled with cancer, and there was no hope. Somehow, years later, she got to see John Paul II, thinking that she had not long to live. And he, with his Polish openness and kindness, noticed that, his warmth, went up to her and gave her a very warm, notice, embrace. And she felt something going through her body, rather similar, we think, to what that lady in the Gospel felt when power came out of Jesus. And the cancer which was pervading her whole body disappeared. There are, in the panorama of this feast, icons of our Lord in human form all over time and space. The youngest on track would be Carlo Acutis, the age of 15, a saint for our youth. I think one on this very day is being beatified. Isn't it the founder of the Knights of St. Columba? These are saints who were called up, raised up for a specific charism and function. But that has always been the case, and it didn't actually start even with the Incarnation, because through the grace of the Incarnation foreshadowed by anticipation, the prophets also had gifts, the same charismatic gifts. And we can still go to places where that grace has been there. Mount Carmel, I felt the presence of Elijah. And all through our west of Europe, we have those traces, even in this place, just outside the monastery, which goes back to St. Keenan, a disciple of St. Patrick. Wales is full of islands, full of mountains and solitary places, and all the villages have a saint in them, Llan something or other, and they are the local traces of grace on earth. And then we have that terrible revolution. It didn't have to happen. Martin Luther could have stayed in the church and done much good. But then it led to a rebirth into glory of a huge army of martyrs as in the first centuries. And there we have them. Remember in Tyburn, very close to where the atrocious torture was happening, because being hanged, drawn and quartered was the maximum of pain they could invent for traitors. I could feel in the air the pain and the glory. And it was the same family. And where I used to go every month for the Welsh Mass near home in Wales, Celladam, they had a major relic of St. John Roberts, who was one of the four, and who was caught at the altar at the last Gospel. They bashed down the door. He was a martyr for being a priest, Benedictine actually. And by the way, these martyrs have a huge power of intercession. One day, Mary, before she died, was in terrible, terrible pain. And she just said to her husband, Harry, do something. Actually, I think it was his mother or mother-in-law. And he had the brainwave to go down to the chapel and get the major relic of St. John Roberts. He applied it to the part of her body which was hurting most. And from that moment onward, until she died, she never groaned again. These are our friends. And I remember in France, in the monastic enclosure, getting many stories from the past. When one of the brethren would die, we would get their whole life. I remember when one of the brethren died, it was Frère Marie, one of the old lay brothers, still dressed in brown, who had known the fullness of the hard life, no heating and all the rest of it, extremely austere. Well, the superior, it wasn't the abbot that day, it was the prior who gave the chapter, said many things which stayed with me. And one line I'll never forget. La vraie trappe est au ciel. The true trap is in heaven. And he gave us to understand that this family, which had gone way back without a break, because the family had always gone on in exile, it never stopped, since 1147, he reminded us that the majority was on the other side, waiting for us to come and join them. And when one of the brethren would die, there was no coffin, and we would be with the person before and after and until he died and put in the grave without a coffin. And there one saw, touching as it were, someone who was touching glory, what mattered and what mattered less in this short innings of time. What is success? These brethren would never be known on earth, not even heard by their brethren. But that was what mattered. They made it. And many who have glory and attention in this world will not make it. What is a goal of football, especially on a Sunday, when it's followed by a mortal sin? Glory is invisible, my friends, and the saints conquered with the same instruments that we have. Let us use them